Wittgenstein's Mistress by David Markson. So this book is an experimental novel which, as the title may allude to, is intellectually indebted to the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, whose Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus I have read and reviewed. You can check that out if you want to hear my take on that monstrosity. But this book is considered by David Foster Wallace, at least, who penned the afterword to it, to be the high point of American experimental fiction. And it is a book which I personally found to be highly respectable, but perhaps not too terribly enjoyable. But I will get to that. So, what is Wittgenstein's Mistress about? What story does this book tell? Well, the novel is presented as a rambling manuscript typed by a woman named Kate, who is apparently the last person on Earth, and actually beyond that, just the last living animal on Earth. She is, for all we know, entirely alone, and is again the last sentient thing on planet Earth. And she is typing out her thoughts, basically. Again, it's a very rambling affair. It's very scattershot. It's basically her just thinking about stuff and typing it out, and also kind of thinking about her life and her past and history and such. And yeah, that's it. That is all there is to the plot of this book. Is just one woman thinking out loud, kind of, or in type, I suppose you might say. So, this book, as I said, is indebted intellectually to the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein because it is his philosophy which permeates the novel. But it does that in a rather interesting way. So, one of Wittgenstein, and again, I read the Tractatus, and I understood some of it. Not all of it by a long shot, but I understood some of it. So I'm trying to expound as best I can on how Wittgenstein's philosophy informs this narrative. But you'll just have to bear with me because, of course, I'm just a layman in that regard. But anyway, so one of the things that Wittgenstein posited in his Tractatus is that language creates a picture of reality, that language is a representation, a map of the world, and that the value, as we know, of any map only exists insofar as it accurately depicts the territory which it is supposed to. And now, also in the Tractatus, Wittgenstein talks a bit about what he called solipsism, and that is the way that reality is kind of subjective because reality defines itself to you as a subject, right? And so what this book effectively does is kind of put this character named Kate, who is the only character, into a world where she is the sole subject. So what this does is that it makes her views of the world kind of be the world in a way. So throughout this book, Kate rambles on about a lot of stuff. In particular, she goes on at length about art because she is or was an artist in the story. And she talks about art history and just kind of history overall. Talks a lot about like the Trojan War, Helen of Troy, that kind of thing, and how these things informed later works of art and stuff like that. But the thing about it is that as her manuscript goes on, we see that her mind is not exactly perhaps in the best shape, as you probably would be if you were the last person on Earth. To quote the rock band Queen, Kate is going slightly mad. And so a lot of what she says is very garbled and very jumbled, and she mixes and matches facts a lot in this. And as Wittgenstein opens his Tractatus by saying, the world is all that is the case, but the world is composed of facts. And here's where it gets interesting, because since Kate is the only subject in the world, the only person in this world, in this book, and since she mixes and matches a lot of information to the point where if you aren't personally as a reader um, knowledgeable about what she's talking about, you're probably going to be confused about it, as I was, because she talks a lot about figures I'm not familiar with. So a lot of it is quite confusing because she contradicts herself a lot, and she'll again mix and match various names and events and such. But the thing is that as Wittgenstein puts forth in his Tractatus, the world is composed of facts, and that language, logical statements, propositions, if you will, form pictures of the facts. That a thought is a picture of a fact which composes the world. But the thing is, in this book, Kate can't verify a lot of these facts that she's saying. And because of that, if you can't verify that what you're saying is actually reflective of reality, then that means that what you're saying kind of is your reality. I think that's what the whole gist of this book is that it's Kate's mind basically being the world, because so much of what she's saying about the world is unverifiable at this point in this book. And so that whatever she thinks about these various figures and histories basically is that. Basically, what she thinks is basically what is, because there's no way that she can verify a lot of this. And so she's kind of making her own world, so to speak, in her mind and typing it out in this manuscript. Now, this is a very interesting thing because it's very unique in the way that this book engages with the philosophy that underpins it. This is a work of philosophical fiction which does not overtly engage with the philosophy that it's built upon. Rather, it affects it. And that also ties in with something that Wittgenstein said in his Tractatus, is that some things, such as like the logical structure of the world, can't be spoken about. They can only be shown. And that's what this book kind of does, because it's what the lines in the book, like what you're actually reading, does not really carry much, if any, philosophical weight, because this book is just composed of just scattered musings and recollections that are just kind of blunt and simple and don't really raise a whole lot of intellectual heft. It's just one woman thinking about things and remembering things, but it's the way that all this comes together illustrates kind of certain elements of Wittgenstein's philosophy. I think that is kind of the gist of this book overall. And also, there are certain things that Kate says in this book that also harken back to things in the Tractatus. Like at one point she says, when winter is here, it will be here. That is a tautological statement which Wittgenstein speaks at length about in the Tractatus, about tautologies and contradictions, of which Kate has plenty in this book. And so this book is really kind of a dramatization, in a way, I think, of elements of Wittgenstein's philosophy. And it really is quite commendable because it truly is experimental. It really is. This is a work of experimental fiction, and that is definitely apparent reading it. So that is kind of the overall thrust of the book, I think. So now let's talk about the technical aspects of it and what I liked and didn't like about it. So the writing in this book is very, very simplistic overall, as it would be. because Kate is not a poet. She's not even really a writer. She's just, banging out her thoughts basically on this typewriter. And so what she says is it's just very kind of pedestrian in its wording, very direct and simple. But that's excusable, but I can't really say that the prose in this is particularly spectacular. It's again pretty just blunt and direct and simplistic, but again, it's given the context that is understandable. And also, almost every sentence in this book is indented. Occasionally, you'll get like two sentences in a paragraph, but almost every single line in this book is indented. So subsequently, the page count is probably inflated a little bit because of that. But the character of Kate now is, I guess she is a reasonably developed character, although so much of what she says in this book doesn't really pertain to her as a person. We get a lot of scattered reminiscences from her life, also confused as well as with much of what else she says. But we do get an intimate, very intimate glimpse into her mindset because that's what this book is. It's just her thoughts written out. So she is I guess, a pretty perspicuous character. But as I said, much of what she says, actually the majority of what she says, is kind of just not really related to her. Again, it's about art and history and art history, and she'll say like, "I wonder if Helen of Troy had a cat." Then she'll be like, "I don't know why Helen of Troy was called Helen of Troy because actually she was from Sparta." And so it's kind of just rambles on like that. And this is stream of consciousness to the max. Like, this is the most stream of consciousness thing I have ever read because it's entirely that. It is 100% just the stream of Kate's consciousness. Um, and I guess we do get an adequate insight into her mind, but a lot of what she says is just it's kind of quotidian, I guess. But overall, good enough character. So let's talk about what I liked about the book. I admired its experimentalism. I admired what the book was doing because, again, it's not something I think really any other book had done or has done probably since. It is a very unique experience, and I can always give points to originality, and this book is definitely original. So props for that. But now let's talk about what I didn't like and kind of my overall feelings regarding the book. As I said at the start, I found Wittgenstein's Mistress to be a book that I respected more than I enjoyed because, to be frank, I did not really enjoy this book overly much. In fact, I found it very, very repetitive. And honestly, I really can't help but think that this might have been more palatable to me, at least, if it had been in a shorter format, because I can't help but think that a great deal of this book is kind of just padding, because it's the last 20 pages or so in the book where it really starts to kind of go for it, so to speak, in terms of increasing the intimacy of these statements and thoughts in regards to Kate and her history, and also kind of bringing all of its kind of philosophical aspects to bear on its conclusion. And so the last 20 pages or so of this book is really what I enjoyed the most about it. But again, I can't help but think that a lot of this book is just padding. And really, I don't know that it had to be as long as it did because it goes over the same ground so many times. Like, she talks about Helen of Troy ad nauseum. She talks about Jackson Pollock and Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci just ad nauseum. And again, it just goes over the same things over and over. And I guess what Markson was doing was giving her time to harp on these things enough so that, again, they gradually become more garbled and confused as it goes on. But really, I do think maybe this didn't need to be quite as long as it was. Maybe this would have worked better for me, at least, as a novella. Um, but also, I did not find it particularly engaging, really, beyond just the experimental aspects of it. Uh, this book it's a lot of people in the reviews I've seen of this book have noted that it's like supposed to be really, really funny and also like really, really tragic and moving. I personally did not find it either of those things. I mean, I can understand, I guess, kind of how some people see it as humorous, but it's humorous in like being told the same joke over and over and over again because it really is that repetitive. It's kind of it's kind of a one trick pony, I suppose, in regards to its humorous elements. And I mean, there were a couple of instances where I was like, maybe that's worth a chuckle, if I'm being gracious, but really it kind of just got boring and wore thin as it went on. And honestly, I did not find it tragic or moving particularly, even though, as I said, in its final pages, it really tries to go for it, so to speak, in that regard. I think more because it becomes decidedly more intimate in its conclusion. But still, I did not find it particularly emotionally um, gripping. I think this is a book that I appreciate more on a stylistic level than I do on its uh, in regards to its actual content. So to rate Wittgenstein's Mistress by David Markson, I'm going to give this book a B plus. I mean, it's commendable. It certainly is because it was doing something truly novel. But I didn't find it all that enjoyable, and I found it just kind of repetitive, and it got boring after a time. So and also I didn't think it was all that powerful, really. But again, props where they're deserved because I'll always tip my hat to originality, but this is not a book that I can see myself picking back up anytime soon, if ever. It's really kind of just again something I can appreciate more stylistically than content wise. So yeah, B plus for Wittgenstein's Mistress. So Wittgenstein's Mistress by David Markson. Have you read Wittgenstein's Mistress? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with what I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read Wittgenstein's Mistress, I will guardedly recommended, I guess. It is a high quality book. It's not by any means a bad book. It's just a book that I didn't really get down with all that well, and I think that my reaction to it is probably kind of representative of what a lot of people's will be reading it. If you're really, really into experimental fiction, I would say give this a go because it definitely succeeds in that respect. But if you want something that's really gonna like hook you in terms of like plot or really move you emotionally, I don't think this will do it. I really don't. It did not for me, and so um, yeah. So I'll guardedly recommend it. I think you will know better than anyone if this is a book for you. So yeah. Reader discretion advised. Anyway, and as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.